Second example that I think reveals the sort of extent of backbench difficulties is the Education and Inspections Bill, which got both its second and its third reading only because of opposition support. Now, it's not unknown for governments to get bills requiring opposition support, but it is pretty rare for a government to get both second and third reading because of opposition support. And it's even rarer for that bill to be one that the Prime Minister says is so vital to his programme. To rely on opposition support at both second and third reading is unprecedented. And three final points, and then I'll happily take some questions. The first is any of this going to change when Brown comes in? Well, I think there's two ways of looking at this. The first is to look at historical precedent. And if you look at the historical precedent, every time there is a change of leader, there is a honeymoon. Both an electoral honeymoon, which I can't actually see happening in this case, but also a honeymoon with the backbenchers. When Major took over from Thatcher, there was a period between November 1990 and the election in 1992, when actually things got very good between Major and his backbenchers. Same thing if you go back and look when Callaghan took over from Wilson. There was a period of calm. But again, look at both of those examples, and you can see that after the honeymoon, things really kick off. Major then had Maastricht, Callaghan had the devolution bill. So, on that alone, you might expect a small honeymoon, lots of backbenchers who think they've been slighted under Blair, but Brown will recognise their abilities. The problem is, well, Blair has recognised their abilities, and that's why they're on the backbenches, but MPs don't tend to look at it quite like that. The other way is just to think in sort of abstract terms. Well, you know, what will change, what won't. And I think you can come up with three variables that might change under Brown. One will be the sense of policy direction. If Brown tacks back to the left, then you will find the PLP happier. The PLP is clearly to the left of the leadership of the left. Well, he will, but he won't by much. And frankly, it won't take long for the PLP, even some of the dimmer ones in the PLP, to realise that. For the last couple of years, I've been collecting sort of statements from Labour MPs about how great it's going to be once Gordon comes in, and I'm looking forward to going back to some of these people over the next couple of years, saying, oh, what you said. Second thing which will change is sort of policy narrative. This is a more important than it might seem. Go and look at something like top-up fees, which were introduced, passed through the Commons in 2004. When top-up fees were first launched, they were sold to the PLP and the public because, in quotes, elite universities needed more money. Now, this was in fact not the best way to sell things to Labour MPs, and so after they got into trouble, they changed the way they were selling it. And they said that what they were going to do would be to have grants for working class kids, screw middle class kids, and it would be a redistributed measure. And suddenly the PLP's happier with it. You know, exactly the same policy, but sold with a different narrative. You sell it as a left-wing measure rather than as a right-of-centre measure. Doesn't matter whether you agree with that or not, that's the way they change the narrative. Now, Brown speaks a different narrative to Blair. Same policy, but he'll bundle them up with a different language. And Labour MPs like that sort of thing. Not just for themselves, but they can go back to their CLPs and you know, it's easier for them to sell the policy to them. The third thing that I don't think will change, and if anything will get worse, is the process of policy formulation. The thing that annoys Labour MPs is being shut out of the policy-making process, having policy come out of number 10, descend on them, be told to support it. Gordon Brown is not, you know, I suppose this depends on your judgment. If you think Gordon Brown is going to be an all-inclusive listening premier, well, A, I think you're mad, and how you got into Cambridge, God only knows. Because he's not. I mean, he's going to be the control freak. He's going to make Blair look like the listening premier. And Labour MPs, again, after a sort of 6-month hiatus, will realise they're completely shut out, and that Brown is not listening to them. And the combination of that with no shift on policy, I don't think the shift in narrative is going to be enough. So I'm expecting all of this to stay, if anything, to get worse. Second thing, the penultimate thing that I think is interesting, is if you look at what the public say they want out of their MPs. The one noticeable change was a survey recently by the Electoral Commission and the Hansard Society. And it asked, what do you want your MP to do? How do you want your MP to behave? The one noticeable change between the 80s and now is the public now rate independence much higher. Much higher than they did in the 80s. In the 80s it ranked sort of mid-table, and actually the public put loyalty to party above independence. They now put independence top of the list. loyalty to the party further down. They want their MPs to behave independently. And of course, that's exactly what they're getting. There's no evidence they recognise that. And at the same time, and this is a problem for MPs, the public want them to be independent-minded, but they also want united parties. And that is an impossible conundrum for MPs to get around. Final point, and then I'll take questions. I just want to read you a quote. It's a quote about MPs, complaining about MPs. MPs who represented not their country but themselves, and always kept together in a close and undivided phalanx, impenetrable either by shame or honour, voting always the same way, and saying always the same things, as if they were no longer voluntary agents, but so many engines merely turned about by mechanical motion, like an organ, where the great humming basses, as well as the little squeaking trebles, are filled but with one blast of wind from the same soundboard. That comes from 1698. It could easily come from stuff written today on MPs. My suspicion is that it was wrong in 1698, and it's wrong now. Thanks very much.